from the blackest corners of your mind, they call, pulling you deep into shadow, twisting your senses, keeping you from sleep. It's time to face your darkest fears. This is Tales to Terrify. Good evening, children of the night, and welcome. A reminder that Tales to Terrify has been nominated for Fiction Podcast of the Year at This Is Horror. If you haven't cast your vote already, head over to thisishorror.co.uk. Every vote counts, and if you enjoy your weekly visit to our grim dungeon, we'd love to have you cast one for us. To add some fuel to your infernal fires, we've got a pair of tales for you tonight. First, a lawyer tries to help a man craft a wish that won't backfire. Then, a woman decides to help her neighbor for not entirely selfless reasons. Our first story for the evening comes from Sammy Krouse. Sammy Krouse is a speculative fiction writer with a focus on fantasy. While primarily crafting fantasy worlds, Sammy loves to venture into horror and science fiction when he is feeling frustrated by the latest draft of his debut manuscript. When not writing, Sammy spends his time bugging his friends about pickleball, being unbearable about coffee, and bothering his gorgeous girlfriend, Gracie. Children of the night, join me for Sammy Krouse's Golden Lamp Contracting and Litigation Services, a Tales to Terrify original.
Damn monkey, the lawyer thought as his client settled into the creaky leather chair across from him. The young man struggled to hold his lawyer's gaze. His pale blue eyes, bloodshot and twitchy, kept flickering to the gnarled monkey paw that he had placed at the lawyer's desk. "I'm not sure how to start," the client broke the silence. "That's up to you," the lawyer responded. "This is your consultation." The client picked at the painful raw skin under his fingernails, his cracked lips opening and closing as he agonized over his next statement. "I don't know if asking a question counts as wishing for an answer," he muttered finally. The lawyer smothered a groan. Another paranoid client. Careless clients came with a different host of frustrations, but at least their sessions were shorter. "You're here, so you've seen the tag. Read it to me." The young man scooched his chair closer to the desk. Careful to avoid contact with the monkey paw, he pulled at the thin span of red twine protruding from the meat of its roughly severed wrist. He read the small, bone-white cardstock tag tied to its end. "Hold the paw and state your wish." "Now the back," the lawyer prodded. The man flipped the tag. "For a complimentary consultation, please visit Golden Lamp Contracting and Litigation Services." The man dropped the tag and returned to brutalizing the skin beneath his fingernails. "You have to hold the paw to make a wish," the lawyer explained. "Otherwise, you're free to say whatever you'd like. I am here to represent your interests, and it would be prohibitively difficult to provide consultation services if you weren't able to ask questions." The client exhaled slowly, a few tight creases smoothing on his pasty white forehead. The lawyer could imagine that some might find him attractive. Of course, not in his current state. The man's matted, tawny hair desperately needed a wash. His pallid skin could use a few uninterrupted hours of sun, and, judging by the rich wine stains under his eyes, he would benefit greatly from a full night's rest. "Thank you," the man said. "I don't know the rules, and I'm terrified of making another mistake." "I understand," the lawyer said. He hoped his client couldn't sense his relief. Sometimes it took hours to convince the backwater idiots that wandered into his office that they were allowed to ask the simplest of questions. The lawyer wondered if management's changes were contributing to the speed that his clientele were put at ease these days. Management liked to say, familiarity facilitates trust. The lawyer couldn't stand the yellowing beige wallpaper, ancient fluorescent lighting, or drab carpeting, but wouldn't complain if the crude setting made his session end faster. He even embraced his dreadful uniform, the horrible cream suit and rumpled mustard yellow tie. Anything to expedite these exercises in futility. "I feel rude, and I haven't introduced myself," the client said. He cleared his throat. "My name is Melvin Bippen, but everyone calls me Vinny." The lawyer could tell that his client was trying to hold eye contact, but his attention continued to shudder to the leathery trophy atop his desk. "Okay," the lawyer responded. He didn't offer his name. "How may I help you, Mr. Bippen?" "I was on my way to work when I found—" Vinny trailed off. "Never mind, that doesn't matter. I was at a pawn shop, and this thing," Vinny gestured toward the monkey paw, "caught my eye. The guy at the shop saw I was looking at it and said I could just take it. No one was buying the thing, and it gave him the creeps." "Get to the wish," the lawyer nudged. The man's eyes twitched to the monkey paw's small finger. Unlike its other 3 fingers and thumb, this digit was curled tightly against its black, leathery palm. "On the walk home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. In school, I read a story about a monkey paw that granted wishes, but it was evil and twisted all the wishes into curses. I figured it was a prop inspired by these stories. Still, something about it was intriguing. Once I got home, I decided to just go for it. What could I lose? My roommate wasn't going to be home for a few hours." "And?" the lawyer prompted. The man sighed. "I wished for riches beyond belief." "How did that work out for you?" "I heard a loud crash in my basement. When I went downstairs, there was a pile of gold bars. Thousands and thousands of them. The concrete was cracked under their weight." Vinny shook his head. "What am I supposed to do with gold bars? I can't take them to the bank. I can't sell them. I looked up how much they're worth. Even one bar would make any legit business ask questions that I can't answer. Of course, there are buyers that wouldn't ask questions, but even if I knew how to find someone like that, I'd be an idiot to bring millions of dollars of gold to their doorstep without protection." Vinny chuckled humorlessly. "I'd buy a gun, but I can't afford one. All my money's tied up in gold." "So, Mr. Bippen, how would you like to move forward?" the lawyer asked. Vinny reached into his tattered Jansport for a crumpled yellow legal notepad. He skimmed over the first few pages, muttering to himself. The lawyer glimpsed the pages as Vinny flipped through the notepad. Each was heavy with blue ink, near overflowing with dense, cramped script. Not even the margins were spared from the man's frenetic scribbling. "I have a few ideas. First, I need to know what you can help me with," Vinny said. The lawyer's tongue raged in futile fury inside its cage of toothbone and soft palate. Seemed the overly cautious rube had worked himself up into the habit of making statements instead of asking questions. The lawyer hoped that his client didn't notice his irritation. Experience had taught him that outward expressions of frustration were counterproductive. His simple-minded clientele were easily unsettled. "I offer 2 kinds of services, contracting and litigation," the lawyer explained. "Contracting is simple. I try to help you craft better wishes. My second offering, litigation, comes into play if you believe that your wish was executed in a manner that twisted your wording beyond a reasonable misinterpretation. I promise to work in good faith, but do not guarantee satisfaction." Vinny nodded thoughtfully, sinking further into his squeaky leather chair. The lawyer hoped he didn't notice the office's distinct lack of smell. Management used to incorporate scents to help shape the general ambiance of their office spaces. The practice was discontinued after a series of embarrassing failures. One especially memorable misstep was an office that reeked of damp fur and curing leather. Ironically, the lawyer remembered the smell as quite similar to the one wafting off the monkey paw. He wondered if they recycled scents. Vinny's Neanderthalic brain finally finished processing the lawyer's offerings. "I already made a wish," the man said. "I am aware. Ask your question," the lawyer responded. Vinny took a deep breath. Can you help me litigate it? The lawyer shook his head. There's no case. Your wording was clear. You asked for wealth beyond belief. Both the quantity and form of the wealth rendered affirm the stipulation of unbelievable. Vinny nodded. The cheap leather cushions rasped as he sunk deeper into his chair. The lawyer was pleasantly surprised. Usually at this point in the session, his clients would argue with him. Maybe this one was less thick-skulled than the rest of his kind. Of course, it wouldn't matter in the end. Can you tell me about a good wish? Vinny asked, rifling through his notes again. One where someone got what they wanted and nothing else? No, the lawyer replied. Vinny sniffed. It was a dry, unpleasant sound. Why not? The lawyer chuckled. Again, he felt an unfamiliar tickle of surprise. His clients didn't usually ask such insightful questions. Of course, this was a question he was unable to answer. There were some things that management forbade him from saying outright. Okay, then, Vinny said, undeterred, pushing through the awkward silence. He looked back at his messily scrawled-upon notepad. What would you recommend I do? Have you considered disposing of the malevolent artifact imbued with the compulsion to twist wishes into curses? The lawyer offered. The dry fissures in Vinny's lips deepened under the pressure of his scowl. His eyes flicked covetously to the monkey's paw sitting on the desk before him, as if the lawyer was going to steal the stinking, twisted thing. Damn monkey. At least he tried. I have a few ideas, Vinny said, desperate to change the topic. My first thought was to wish for the full value of the gold in my possession to be transferred to my bank account, and that no one question where I got the money from. He skipped through a handful of pages in his crumpled notepad. The lawyer realized that he couldn't remember if Vinny had blinked since he'd entered his office. Of course, Vinny continued, that would use up one of my wishes, and judging by how the paw reacted to my first wish, I only have 4 left. 3 if the thumb doesn't count. Vinny paused, jumping through another half-dozen pages. The next idea was to wish that no one would notice or question the impact of any of my wishes. Vinny's tongue flashed along his lips. I think that would solve the issues with my first wish and mitigate this problem for the rest of my wishes, too. What do you think? The lawyer shook his head. That would be a terrible wish. It expresses a goal, but gives the paw discretion over the execution of said goal. Theoretically, a good wish would have an exact goal, a detailed execution method, and airtight perimeters confining the impact of both. Vinny stared blankly at his lawyer. The lawyer didn't sigh in frustration. Your wish needs to be far more specific, he explained. There are countless ways to make no one question the impact of your wishes. The paw could make it so that you, and everything you interacted with, were turned invisible, intangible, and lost the ability to generate noise. That way, no one would be at risk of perceiving the impact of your wishes, as they would no longer be able to notice you at all. Blood leached from Vinny's already too pale face. The lawyer continued. Even better, the paw could make it so that everyone that noticed something strange in relation to your wishes was spontaneously poofed into a pile of glitter. That would stop people from noticing your wishes, wouldn't it? The lawyer couldn't help the faintest smirk curl the corner of his thin lips. In his previous role, glitter was one of his favorites. The lawyer missed his former vocation. Misconstruing wishes was delightful fun, especially compared to this absurd performance. Still, he didn't regret his transfer. As much as he detested his current role, anything was better than decade-long stretches of confinement within the cramped, curved walls of a golden lamp, waiting for his next victim, the client. Vinny didn't notice his lawyer's twisted grin or the fond, faraway look in his eyes. His eyes were glued to the malevolent, withered monkey's paw. Vinny's too wet tongue caressed his cracked lips. They were bleeding now, deep red crevices glistening between segments of fat pink lip skin. Or, of course, there is always another option, the lawyer continued, as if the thought had just popped into his mind. You could recognize the danger inherent in this situation and walk away. Vinny didn't seem to hear the lawyer's last sentence. All right, he said, turning to a blank page on his yellow notepad. He began to scrawl notes. I need an exact goal, a detailed execution method, and tight perimeters. The lawyer chuckled. It was a soundless thing, more a rumbling of his chest than anything else. Humans were so predictable. After thousands of years of bad supernatural bargains, the crafty apes were deemed too weak-willed to face off against his kind without access to legal representation. Strangers lurking at crossroads, demons dangling soul pacts, jinn waiting impatiently inside golden lamps. The dumb primates couldn't help themselves. Vinny's brow furrowed into a pallid topography as he tried to construct the perfect wish. The lawyer poked holes in each clever twist of wordplay. His client was undeterred. The lawyer almost felt bad for him. There was no perfect wish. Management had tasked the lawyer and his peers with only one goal: try and show their clients that this was a game they couldn't win, that the only good move was to refuse to play. The lawyer had represented countless clients. Sometimes their sessions lasted decades. Sometimes they lasted minutes. The hairless apes always cracked. Vinny peppered the lawyer with question after question, pen bleeding blue on his yellow legal pad. His eyes danced with the desperate, manic gleam of a cornered animal. The pages of Vinny's notepad fluttered at the light breeze of fresh air that wandered in from the cracked door behind him. It smelled wonderful. Vinny didn't seem to notice. The lawyer sighed. Damn monkey.
That was Sammy Krouse's Golden Lamp Contracting and Litigation Services, as read by Anthony Babington. Anthony Babington is an aspiring voice actor who looks just slightly off from how he sounds. From his secret volcano lair in Minnesota, he narrates podcasts and leases his soul to corporate America. He has previously recorded for Far-Fetched Fables, Starship Sofa, and the Cursed Inn podcast. He can be found on Twitter at Aleph Baker. Thank you, Anthony. Our second tale tonight comes from Dan Rafter. Dan Rafter has worked as an editor and writer of nonfiction for more than 30 years, writing for everyone from the Chicago Tribune and Washington Post to Mental Floss, Phoenix Magazine, and Bankrate. He's only dabbled in fiction writing, even though it is a lot more fun, and is thrilled to have his story featured by Tales to Terrify. Listen with me, children of the night, to Dan Rafter's The Untarget, a Tales to Terrify original.
One ham and cheese omelet, 610 calories. 1 pile of fried hash browns, 380 calories. 1 breakfast sandwich, 410 calories. 2 slices of white bread toast with butter, 310 calories. The grand total for one breakfast, 1,710 calories. That is how you stay over 300 pounds and make sure you're not a target for the murderer who lives in the unit next door. They call him the fashion model murderer on Reddit, but that's not entirely accurate. He doesn't kill fashion models, just girls who look like they could be one. He used to scour the city for just the right ones, his special type, until I started sending them directly to him. Like Sarah here, my newest roommate. If I had to guess, she's just under 5'10". She probably weighs about 130 pounds. Perfect for the murderer next door. And despite that skinny little waist of hers, she loves my famous apple cider muffins. And wouldn't you know it, I'm out of sugar. Again. Sarah? I ask, pulling my roomie's attention away from her phone. I'm out of sugar. Can you go next door and borrow some? Sarah frowned. Can't you do it without sugar? Yep. Sarah probably hadn't cooked a single muffin in her 28 years on Earth. He's a nice guy. Name is Max, I think. He always lets me borrow stuff when I run out. Tell him I'll save him a muffin. Sarah sighed, but before she complained, I tilted my mixing bowl toward her, showing her the brownish dough inside. See? Almost there. She couldn't resist. Setting her phone face down on the counter, she trotted off to the neighbor in those black gloves he always wore. Sarah didn't come back, of course. The fashion model murderer was very efficient. But just to make sure, I waited by the front door, staring through that peephole. Sure enough, 90 minutes later, he came out. Max is more Ted Bundy than John Wayne Gacy. If they ever arrest him, they'll need the extra-large sack for all the mail he'll get from the groupies. Wasn't a bad dresser either. Like today. Expensive-looking sunglasses, a blank red baseball cap with no logo, hunter green jacket, dark black jeans, black slip-on shoes. The perfect outfit that you'd never be able to describe to a detective. And his briefcase, of course. That's the tricky part. It's big. For a briefcase. But I've never figured out how he fits the bodies in it. It's not that big. I'm sure there's some chopping and grinding involved. That accounts for the 90 minutes or so. But I'm fuzzy on the logistics. I admired how he walked down the hallway, too, never in a hurry. Me? I'd be shitting my pants if I was walking around with a briefcase full of human remains. But not Max. He strolled to the elevator like he was in no hurry to get to the office. Speaking of speed, it was time for treasure hunting. The door to Sarah's bedroom was locked, but that was no problem. I pulled the twisted bobby pin out of my pocket and was able to pop that lock in under 15 seconds. Sarah's room didn't look much different than it did when it was Ruby's, Beth's, Lindy's, Mary's, or Frida's. Drawers hanging open, exposing panties and bras, all as small as you'd imagine a fashion model type would wear, shoes sticking out from under the bed, sheets thrown in a wad, and 3 cans of half-empty Diet Coke scattered on the small desk and end tables. Oh, and the half-empty pack of cigarettes. These skinny bitches love to smoke. What I wanted, though, was right on the dresser. Sarah's purse. I dug through it, tossing out crumpled Kleenex, smeared sample-sized bottles of hand lotion, and topless lipstick tubes, until I found Sarah's wallet. Inside? It wasn't a huge haul, but it wasn't peanuts either. Sarah had $64 in cash, which I shoved in my pockets. But even better, she had the shiny blue plastic of a Visa credit card. It was time to go shopping. Licking my lips, yes, I do that when I'm excited. And yes, it looks like I'm ready to plow through a giant turkey leg when I'm doing it. And if you ever saw me when I wasn't 300 pounds, you'd just attribute it to a nervous tic. Which is what it is, asshole. I headed to my laptop. I like to wrap up my online shopping sprees in under 15 minutes. But you'd be surprised at how much you can buy with someone else's credit card in that amount of time. And when that 15 minutes had passed, I was just 1 week away from a new toaster oven, laptop, iPhone, and AirPods. The hard part was finding the right roommate. There was the girl sitting across from my kitchen table, Jody, that one time. She should have been perfect. She had long blonde hair, straight and shiny, bright blue eyes, and skin as golden as macaroni. But I didn't like the answer to this question. What are you doing out here in Carpentersville, Jody? My boyfriend works nearby, and it's not far from my parents. That wouldn't do, so I said I'd be in touch. There was Mandy, too, who was almost a carbon copy of Jody, except she had straight brown hair and shimmery hazel eyes. But here's what she told me. I wanted to live closer to my sister and brother. They both live outside Cincinnati. And so it went. It was why it took so long to find the perfect roomie. Then came someone like a Janet. Tall, athletic, brown hair tied in a ponytail. When I asked her what brought her to Carpentersville, hardly the bustling type of city that people move to for fun, she gave the perfect answer. My mom died a few months ago, and my dad passed 10 years ago. I just found myself feeling so alone in Pittsburgh. Figured it was time to make a new start. Didn't really have any family to leave behind. I always smiled at answers like that. Do you know anyone in Carpentersville? Janet shook her head, then reconsidered. Well, I know you, I guess. I grinned. I guess so. Finding Janet took 2 months. That was actually pretty good. The longest it's taken me to find a Janet, or a Sarah, Emily, or Susan, is 5 months. I got worried that time. Max's eyes were starting to linger on me when we passed in the hallway. I could tell he was getting desperate. I didn't know much about Max, other than him being a serial killer, of course, but I didn't know that he was a homebody. It's why he liked the victims to come to him. And he'd already killed off Amy, Wendy, and Gwen, the only 3 renters who'd, I say, resembled fashion model types in our building that I hadn't brought in as a roommate. So I did start to sweat a bit when I saw his apartment door creak open while I was waiting in front of the elevator with my basket of laundry. I wasn't anywhere close to finding the right roomie. Everyone had a brother in town, family just a few miles away, or called home to their mom and dad every Sunday. The loners, runaways, or weirdos? They weren't answering my ad. I mean, I know what I looked like. 320 pounds, close-cropped black hair, thick glasses, and a gray sweatshirt. Not fashion model material. And for good measure, I had a stain on the front of my sweatshirt from last week's bowl of Rocky Road ice cream. Normally, that'd be enough of a shield to keep Max and his meat cleaver, or whatever he used to dismember my roommates, at bay. But that night, he walked right up behind me and cleared his throat. My eyes bugged out. He was actually going to talk. To me. And what he said almost made me drop my laundry. How is the search for a new roommate going? He stared at me, that straight-in-your-eyes look that only weirdos do. And me? I could only gurgle out a few ums. Max smiled, but it wasn't a friendly one. What's wrong, Margaret? My name. He knew my name. I didn't remember ever having talked to him before. I'm just wondering if you're making any progress on the search yet. You know, you don't need a perfect roommate. But it'd be nice to have a new one, right? The holidays aren't that far off. The holidays? Max's smile grew larger and even more sinister. Yes. Help with the bills, right? Having that sublease in place. I pressed the elevator button again, willing the doors to open. Max chuckled behind me. I stared at the painting that had hung above the elevator ever since I'd moved in. It was so bland it hurt the eyes. A flower, a lily, floating in pastel blue water. The colors were so dim. I'm not sure if whoever created it painted them that dim, or if years of fluorescent hallway lights had washed them away. The painting looked like how a buttermint candy tasted. Sometimes if things take too long, you might get desperate, you know? Max said, and I swear he was standing closer to me. A bit. I nodded. Yes, I'm sure someone will turn up. Max kept talking like he didn't hear me. Desperate enough where maybe you'd, I don't know, get something to eat you normally wouldn't choose, if it was around. Or maybe you'd grab the closest thing to you, even if it wasn't necessarily what you'd prefer, if you get desperate enough. I could now feel Max's breath on my back. It smelled like Diet Coke. I switched my gaze from the painting to the spotted carpet, a way to hide at least some of my neck from that caffeinated breath. I noticed an M&M on the floor, in the corner, dusty but blue. Finally, the elevator doors slid open. I'd still have to survive the trip down to the basement and the laundry room, but Max wasn't holding anything. Maybe he was just going to the first floor. That wouldn't be enough time to kill anyone, right? I stepped into the elevator, took a deep breath, and turned to face the hallway. There was Max, his back facing me, walking back toward his apartment door. He never turned back to look at me, not even as the elevator doors closed. But I couldn't stop sweating. Max knew my name, and even worse, he knew what I was doing for him. So that's why I never dawdled when it came time to find a new roommate, even if I had all the flat-screen TVs, nonstick frying pans, and virtual reality headsets I'd ever need. And it was also why I was so relieved whenever the perfect roommate showed up, like Maxine, who came right after Sarah. I had a good feeling as soon as she texted me her name over my new iPhone. Thanks, Sarah. Maxine and Max. Pretty cute. When she showed up, she was perfect. Tall, thin, black hair so dark it was nearly purple, and all these jangly bracelets ringing from her wrists. She jingled-jangled when she walked. She'd get Max's attention immediately. Her purse was cool, too. Black, with some kind of candy skull sewed into its front. It was overstuffed and looked like it weighed a ton, but the way she had it slung over her shoulder, she reminded me of some sort of anime character. That purse would be her gimmick, the way viewers could tell her apart from the other purple-haired, jingly-wristed girls on the show. And the best part of it all? When I asked her the magic question, this is how she answered. I like to move around. I've been to Chicago, KC, Appleton, St. Louis, Des Moines, you name it. Guess I've been on a Midwest tour most of my life. Oh, you don't stay put too long? Maxine's bracelets jangled as she strode into the kitchen, leaving me standing in the living room alone. Never too long, she called out from the kitchen. What's that song? Like a rolling stone? That's me. I walked into my kitchen to find Maxine staring at my spice rack, tapping their labels with her index finger, her skull purse still slung over her shoulder. She had that supermodel look. And always on the move? Cops didn't often come looking when they didn't even know a victim existed. It's hard to make friends that way, though, I asked innocently. You know, moving around so much. Maxine shrugged. Yeah, good way to leave your family behind, though. She turned to me and winked. Family sucks, right? I felt the smile stretching across my face. She really was perfect. Except for that nosing around my spice rack thing, she was tapping her chin and frowning. No cumin? That's an essential. Pardon me? And where's your tarragon? My what? It's not as essential as cumin, but it's definitely in the top 30% of spices. Maxine turned from my spice rack and shot me a little frown. Don't you cook much? This was too personal, but I needed another supermodel to keep Max happy, so I just smiled and shrugged my shoulders. Not with cumin or tarragon, I guess. Maxine sighed, then brightened. Her eyes, I swore, sparkled. She reached into her purse and pulled out 2 bottles, one filled with cumin, the other with tarragon. What luck! I happen to have some with me. Maxine cooked a lot, and the pot she used was large. It looked like a small metal bathtub perched atop my stove. And no matter when I walked into the kitchen, something was boiling in that pot, steam billowing and crawling across my stucco kitchen ceiling. Maxine would inevitably see me standing at the entrance to the kitchen and beckon me forward, curling a single index finger. She'd hold up a ladle dripping with brown or yellow or reddish liquid, drops dribbling onto the floor. "Try this," she'd say. And I'd shake my head, but then I'd inevitably walk over, almost as if my feet were floating forward on their own. The liquid in that ladle, no matter the color, always smelled so enticing. My stomach would grumble, and sometimes, embarrassingly, I'd drool a bit. Maxine would lift the ladle to my lips, her bracelets jangling, and I'd take a sip. My stomach smiled every time. That's right, a big, giant, dopey grin. That's how good it tasted. "What is that?" I'd ask. Maxine would shake her head. "Trade secret," she'd say, and she'd turn her back to me and add more spices to the pot, the odors and steam changing with every dash or teaspoon of flavor. I'd get tired then and head off to my room for a nap. And when I woke up, I could have sworn someone had spilled salt, pepper, cumin, coriander, thyme, or oregano on my arms, in my hair, or on my shirt. But that would be crazy, so I kept that to myself. I never did see Maxine eat anything she cooked herself. When I'd wake up, the pot would be gone, and I'd feel absolutely stuffed. But that sounded strange, too, so I never said anything about that either. I'm not exactly what you'd call spry. I'm not one to hit the gym or do jumping jacks in the back driveway. But after Maxine moved in, I felt even more lethargic. Getting out of bed in the morning left me gasping for breath. If I dropped the soap in the shower, I left it there and just unwrapped a new bar. And changing the light bulb that had burnt out in my bedroom ceiling fan? Forget it. That required climbing on a footstool, and I wasn't ready for that kind of a workout. One morning last week, it was especially hard to get out of bed. I woke up, fell asleep, woke up again, fell asleep again. I slept this way past 9 a.m., when I was supposed to log on to my laptop and start convincing people that they needed cheap life insurance supplements. The fear of losing my job wasn't strong enough to force me to push my legs over the side of the bed and creak my body to a standing position. But the smell of whatever Maxine was cooking in the kitchen, all peppery and spicy, that did the trick. And eventually I lumbered, my breath ragged already, into the kitchen where Maxine was, as usual, pouring spices into that oversized pot. Her jangly bracelets rested on the counter. The only time she ever took them off, and the only time when I couldn't hear her moving around the apartment, was when she was cooking. I stopped at the bracelets, looking down at them. It was the first time I noticed the images engraved in the silver band. A snake's head on each silver strip. Their mouths open, fangs exposed, tongue sneaking out. Something about those snakes freaked me out. Maxine still had her back to me. Quickly, I held my phone over one of the bracelets and snapped a picture. "Hey!" I looked up. Maxine was looking at me, holding a ladle dripping with broth. "Wanna try?" she asked. I did, of course. Those snakes? Google said that they were used by an ancient sect of witches to identify themselves. When a witch saw another woman wearing one of the snakes, whether on a necklace, a ring, or a bracelet, she knew that she'd found an ally. The sect's name was unpronounceable, a lot of K's, W's, Y's, and G's. But basically, they were your Hansel and Gretel type witches. The kind that liked to cook up kids. And adults, I assumed. The next day, I finally got my chance. I'd been studying Maxine's cooking habits. She almost always used thyme in her soups. So that morning, I woke up early, prying my heavy lids open and swinging my even heavier legs over the side of my bed. When I looked down, I noticed a small pile of salt and pepper on the bedroom floor between my feet. Again, that seemed odd. But again, I kept my thoughts to myself. It was time to get rid of Maxine anyway. I crept from my room and into the kitchen. Morning light hadn't yet inched into my apartment, so everything was fuzzy. I was already breathing heavy as I snuck into the kitchen and opened the pantry door. The Times sat inside, right in front, within easy reach of Maxine's hand. I snagged it, shoved the jar into the pocket of my sweatpants, and crept back to my room. By the time I got there, I could barely breathe. I fell face first into the mattress, spent the next 2 hours waking myself up with thick, wet snores. The pounding on my bedroom door woke me up. I lifted my face from my pillow, drool stretching from my mouth to the satin. I could hear Maxine yelling. "Where's the time?" she shouted. The aroma of yet another soup wafted into my room. It smelled delicious. "You in there?" Maxine asked. "Yes. Go to the neighbor across the hall. Max. He'll have it." The pounding stopped. "Borrow it from the neighbor?" Maxine sounded dubious. "He doesn't mind," I said. "Besides, he's cute." Maxine didn't say anything, but I could hear her bracelets jingling as she moved away from my bedroom door. And a second or two later, I heard the slight wheeze that my apartment door made every time someone opened it. "Fuck you, witch," I mumbled as I slowly fell back asleep. That should have been the end of it. When I woke up later, I wasn't sure of the time, but my bedroom was dark. I was already dreaming of the new smartwatch I was going to order, the most expensive one on the market. But when I opened my eyes, I noticed something strange. Well, I actually noticed it when I opened my nose, I guess. The smell of soup filled my bedroom. I didn't know the exact spice blend I was sniffing, but I had a feeling that plenty of thyme was involved. And yep, that freaked me out. Max should have been taking the elevator downstairs. Maxine's body somehow stuffed into his briefcase. Instead, I could have sworn I heard Max's voice coming from my kitchen. "Wow, that's delicious," the voice said. "Amazing what a bit of time can do." I pressed the heels of my hand into my eyes, certain that I was dreaming, but that didn't do anything except pop stars in my vision. I wasn't asleep, and Max was in my kitchen, tasting one of Maxine's fucking soups. Then I heard Maxine's voice. "Yep, just needs the main ingredient. Meat, seasoned perfectly." Lifting my head from the pillow wasn't working. It felt like a boulder was attached to my neck. No matter how hard I strained, I couldn't budge, and my legs? They felt like 2 fire hydrants bolted into the ground. Strangest of all was the inside of my mouth. I could taste something. Oregano? Thyme? Coriander? Maybe all of them? The taste wasn't just on my lips or tongue either. It coated the entire inside of my mouth. But when I went to wipe my lips, I couldn't move my hands or lift my arms. They were both too heavy, like my head and legs. I heard the jingle of Maxine's bracelets before the soft knock on my door. I tried to at least roll my head to the side before answering, but I couldn't even manage that. Not that it mattered. Maxine opened the door before I could even croak out a what. She stuck her head through the crack, a huge smile on her face. I rolled my eyes to the side. Even that was a struggle, and saw those stupid bracelets jangling against her wrists. "Hey, Sleepy," she said. "You were right about the neighbor. He did have time." Maxine's grin didn't waver as she moved to the side, letting Max step into the room. Max had a blank look on his face. It was like static on a TV screen. His mouth was hanging open and his tongue was sticking out. It was hard to tell, but I think he was drooling. "Before I forget, do you have any tips for writing those roommate wanted ads?" Maxine asked. She was standing over me now, placing the palm of her hand against my forehead, almost as if she was checking my temperature. "Looks like you're just about done." It was then that I noticed Max was holding a butcher knife in one hand and his briefcase in the other. "I could really use a nice plump roommate," Maxine said, "but you better spit out those tips fast. I'm starving." She rubbed her stomach and pointed to Max. "Sir," she said, "will you do the honors?" Max was standing over me now, too, holding his knife above my chest, looking like he was ready to carve a Thanksgiving turkey. So yeah, I'm a ghost now. And being a ghost, it sucks, City. No one can hear me, no one can see me, and no one can feel me. All that stuff you see in movies about ghosts screaming in people's faces or throwing people across the room, that's all bullshit. And when you die, that's who you are when you're a ghost. I'm condemned to hover around as a 300-pound woman. Not the perfectly happy 160-pound girl I once was. No, the 300-pound version of me. There's not much to do either. I tried to scare a few people, but they just walked through me. So I mostly just hang around my apartment building. It's easy to lose track of time, but I do my best by counting Maxine's roommates. So far, I've seen maybe 24 girls come in through what was once my apartment door. Most of them leave a few minutes later, never to return. But there have been 4 that have stayed. And yeah, the ones that made the cut were all like the ghost version of me, big. The 4th one has stayed for about 3 weeks now, which means that her time is coming up. I've been watching her and Maxine, hovering just outside the window that I know looks out from above the stovetop. The funny thing about being a ghost, you can still smell things. I take a big whiff, and the scent of time, the same scent I sniffed before Max cut into me, almost makes me feel like I'm alive again.
That was Dan Rafter's The Untarget, as read by Nikolle Doolin. Nikolle is a writer and voice actor. She performs for a number of popular and award-winning podcasts, such as the No Sleep Podcast, Far-Fetched Fables, and Tales to Terrify. To learn more about Nikolle, visit her website at NikolleDoolin.com. Thank you, Nikolle. Well, children of the night, the hour is late, and we've run out of tales to tell. For now. Tales to Terrify is made possible by the tremendous generosity of our supporters on Patreon and PayPal. Incredible fans like Lestle Baxter, Amanda Carrillo, Amanda Gottfried, and Orion D, Hegre, whose generous support keeps these lights on and flickering ominously. If you're not a supporter, head over to patreon.com/Tales to Terrify. You'll find all kinds of perks, like ad-free episodes, bonus content, and one-of-a-kind collectibles. Every dollar goes back into this show, and we appreciate your support so much. Want another way to support the show that doesn't cost you a cent? Head over to Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts and drop us a 5-star review. You'll not only put an unnaturally wide smile on our faces, but help new listeners discover our terrifying tales, too. You can show your love of the show out in the world with some Tales to Terrify merch. TalesToTerrify.com/merch will take you to our TeePublic store, where we've got a great collection of creepy custom and curated designs. Tales to Terrify is produced by Seth Williams, Meredith Morgenstern, Andrew Gibson, Crystal Hammond, Spencer Disparty, and myself, Drew Sebastini, with original theme by Nebulous Entertainment. Tales to Terrify is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Join us again next week as we search for the missing with more Tales to Terrify.